when I was out there, I'd stay with mining companies, and they had these pretty extensive operations. They had hundreds of mine workers. They had who were all Angolan. Then they had about 50 Filipino, maybe more staff who spoke some Spanish and therefore could understand enough Portuguese that they could sort of make it work, but also could speak some English. So they were the sort of the intermediary staff. What would they do? They would cook. There was a Filipino doctor. They would cut your hair, stuff like that. So they fulfilled all the sort of roles that the local Angolans weren't permitted to. And we all lived in shipping containers, and they cut out a door and a little tiny place for an air conditioning unit. And there's no electricity out there, of course, so they had massive generators that they would run constantly, and they require a lot of fuel, of course, too. And so from there, they would drive me into Kafunfu, and I would interview people in town. And it was the first time, honestly, I've ever had a gun. And because whenever you moved, you had to be armed, because it was so violent. And so I actually had an AK-47 that they would give me when we moved from place to place. And so, which was crazy. And I would interview individuals all day, and then they'd come back and pick me up at night and take me back. The two one was really unnerving. I don't know how much detail to go into, but in any event, there were multiple layers of security. So there was a lot of Angolan commandos who had fought in the Civil War were hired to kind of for security, and then they had a sort of inner security. These were guys who had fought for white guys who had fought for South Africa, who were in the SADF, Portuguese commandos, the types of guys who want to go to Iraq and make a lot of money being private security, those sorts of guys. And they were actually, a lot of them are really fun characters. They had a blast with me. They thought that I was in the CIA because they couldn't figure out what I was doing there. There was a guy named Luis from Portugal, and I always remember this. He said, "Todd, what is your favorite bomb?" So they truly thought I was CIA. They would always talk like this, and their thing. So I had good fun with them. I probably spent more time with them than anybody else. They were very supportive. But one time, the director of the mining operation was convinced that his chief of security had been bought off, essentially, had been bribed by some of the illicit operations. And so he wanted to go out and find out for himself what was going on. And it was a day that I wasn't interviewing, and he said, "Oh, come, we'll go." So we had the two of us, two guns, and then we had a pickup truck, and he had a mounted machine gun on the top of the truck. So we were driving around, and eventually we found a huge illicit mining operation. And I mean, probably a couple hundred people, huts, satellite dish to watch television. And we went over a little hill, and there were a whole bunch of guys armed, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and it was just the three of us, and I was scared to death. And so he stopped. We didn't do anything. They pointed their guns very deliberately and menacingly at us, and he put the truck in reverse, and we went very, very slowly backwards until we could turn around, and then we went very fast. So that was the most scared I'd ever been, and I was mad at myself for even going on that little outing.